Hello and welcome. This is the Big Baseball and Beyond podcast, a new venture by D1 Baseball. He's Burke Granger. I'm Patrick Ebert. And the two of us cover the Midwest for D1 Baseball at the college baseball level. Burke, good afternoon. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Patrick. It's the day after opening weekend, so I'm energized. I'm not refreshed, but I'm ready to be here with you, my good buddy, to talk about the Midwest baseball.
Now, Burke, you were out in North Carolina this weekend. We're going to get into your observations here in a little bit, specifically Michigan State, specifically Cincinnati. Well, it's pleasantly, I shouldn't say surprised. I was pleasantly happy to see that they joined the D1 Baseball Top 25 this morning. I'm sure you were as well. Pretty special effort there for a team that I don't believe has ever been ranked. But, now they're in the Big 12. They got a new head coach in George Bichelle, at least from last year. That bar has been raised there. But we'll get into the Cincinnati in a little bit here. I want to talk a little bit about this podcast here. You and I have been talking about doing a Midwest-centric baseball podcast going back to last year, and probably actually before that. We're obviously very passionate about the game of baseball. Both of us have our kind of roots in scouting. That's where that passion is kind of fueled from a player development and just recruiting side of things, being able to actually break down the players. I'm a firm believer that at any level of the game, of any sport for that matter, it's the players that make the game as special as it is. And being able to watch those players, being able to share those stories and share just what they're all about is of great importance to me. I'm sure you would agree with everything I just said, because when we do talk about these things, we have a lot of shared passion. Why don't you talk a little bit about this big baseball and beyond and what it means to you?
No, I think you nailed it. So you mentioned up top, like, this is going to be player centric. A lot of the coverage that you and I provide is focused on the players, and that doesn't just mean draft prospects, right? Like, while we're sitting there with the scouts, they might put their radar gun and save the battery when the guy comes in and he's throwing 84 to 87, but he's getting people out. There's a story to tell there for D1 baseball fans, and you and I need to dig in and figure out how that guy's getting outs. Um, and to me, that's some of the most compelling stuff that I see at the ballpark. So it's going to be player centric. There's 17 teams now in the Big Ten, so there's always going to be action for us to cover around the country on games that we don't go to. But then you and I are often at the ballpark almost every weekend. So there's going to be things that we're going to be able to talk about every weekend regarding firsthand accounts. Some weekends we'll bring in coaches to have interviews, and those coaches are going to look at you, the D1 baseball audience, and they're going to say things like, "We have more pitching depth than we did last year," because every coach says that. No one says they have less depth, but you as the audience now are going to be able to say they're lying because I can see the stat sheets. They don't have the pitching depth, but some of the teams I saw this weekend, I think the coaches were telling me the truth. So overall, just I'm excited to use this platform as another way for us to advocate for Midwest baseball. It doesn't get, in my opinion, in your opinion, the respect in that it deserves. So it's incumbent upon us. It's our responsibility to convey that to the listening audience and show people that they can really play good baseball in the flyover states.
Yeah, that's well said, Burke. And I think, it's always been an uphill battle for teams, especially in the Big Ten. I think some of that is deserved, some of it's not. But, you know, you look back to that 2021 season when they played only an in-conference schedule and you could throw RPI out the window and they had two teams from the Big Ten that made the NCAA tournament. And, they kind of had to see that coming. But, if you're the coaches in the Big Ten, which is an outstanding collective group of coaches. Like
Right.
I just love the representation of the people, like not just the Big Ten, but the Midwest. You're not going to like that, and they have to work together very hard to make sure every single one of them is scheduling the right way and recruiting the right way and doing what they can to raise the overall bar in the conference to make sure that that RPI profile is improved. And now when you add those four Pac-12 castoffs, like just like come on into the Big Ten, like those four teams. When I'm especially looking at UCLA with head coach John Savage, that can only help. And I'm really excited to see how those overall ramifications help the league. And we're going to talk about that here on Big Baseball and Beyond all season long. I'm going to point out there are Midwest teams in each of the four power conferences. Obviously, the Big Ten's the big one, but you got Notre Dame and the ACC. You have Kansas State, and Cincinnati, right, in the Big 12,
Yep.
and then missing one. And then you have Missouri in the FCC. So, we actually do have a full Power Four representation. It's not huge with those other conferences. And I also want to point out, we're not just going to talk Big Ten. The MAC lives here. Missouri Valley Conference lives here. You got the Summit, the Horizon, a few other leagues that have a few teams sprinkled in. So we're going to do our best to share those stories with all of you. So with that, I think it's a good time, unless you have anything else you want to add, Bert, to jump right in and talk about this weekend. And I think there's no better place to start than Puerto Rico. They had the inaugural Puerto Rico College Baseball Challenge, or a name similar to that. And our very own Aaron Fitt was there covering that event. Did a great job. He was at that game on Friday where Michigan took down number 2 Virginia. And then he went over to the other site that had games, was able to see Penn State played, wrote stories on both of them. Michigan ends up going 4-0. They beat Stetson. We're recording on a Monday. They beat Stetson this morning. Penn State went 2-1. The only game they lost was to Stetson. And, Stetson's obviously not a Midwest team. I'm actually going to see them this weekend. I'm very excited. They look really good right now. But that's just more of an aside. Burke, you wrote about Michigan and Penn State about the Big Ten preview. You talked to Tracy Smith, Michigan's head coach, quite often. You just talked to him as you were previewing the big tournament that's coming up this coming weekend. Why don't you share your thoughts on Michigan and Penn State and their successful start so far?
All right. So let me start off by asking you a question. I promise I have a point. As you know, sometimes it takes me a while to get there, but have you ever gone to the supermarket when you're hungry, Patrick?
Yes,
And what happens?
I buy food.
Yes. Everything looks better when you're hungry, right? So you
Yeah.
buy things sometimes you don't need. Um, well, my point in that is, when I saw Michigan in the fall, I hadn't been to a baseball game since Cape Cod. So I was starving for baseball. And I came away, I loved what I saw. And I wrote, I think, on Twitter, and wrote in their fall report, like, I think this is a regional team. I think this is a team that can compete at the top of the Big Ten. And then I had a layover over the holidays, and I started overanalyzing and questioning myself. Like, was it that supermarket effect? Did I really like them as much as I thought I did? Then I started writing the Big Ten preview, and I doubled down. Like, it's my only mistake was doubting myself. I think they're a good team. I think they're going to be a very good team. They're an older, experienced roster with a ton of accumulated at bats in their lineup. Offensively, they brought in a bunch of guys to help. Jonathan Kim and Mitch Voigt, 2 guys that have been there and starting since their freshman year. Mitch Voigt, by the way, had 4 doubles and 2 home runs this weekend. But Michigan didn't just bring in like these one and done mercenaries who are going to play 1 year and then go off. Like, they brought in guys who are sophomores: Colby Turner from San Diego State, Cade Ladenhoff from New Jersey Tech, guys that can help them not only this year but build towards the future. Also brought in a good freshman class, both offensively and defense and on the mound. Pitching this weekend was terrific. They allowed just 6 earned runs in 4 games. Gavin DeVoit, another sophomore transfer, came over from Ohio State. He had 2 wins this weekend, one in relief on Friday against number 2 Virginia. And then today, on Monday, he struck out 7 in 5 shutout innings against Stetson. Dylan Vigue, sophomore, draft eligible sophomore, he started for him on Fridays last year. He's got Friday night stuff. He's got pro stuff, but he wasn't able to turn over a lineup last year. He probably averaged 3 innings per start, which obviously puts a strain on the bullpen when your Friday starter goes 3 innings. And the depth, this is one of those things where I believe Coach Smith has more depth this year than he did last year. Last year, they relied really on 3 pitchers. So it's kind of a testament to how successful they were last year. This year, they brought in new arms, like I said. Gavin DeVoit, David Lally, they brought in from Notre Dame. He was always kind of a high profile power arm guy, just struggled to throw strikes. Well, he was great over the weekend. Kurt Barr is their steady Eddie guy from last year. He's back. He threw well again over the weekend. So really kind of impressed with Michigan's start. Obviously, I think part of it is they went to the Dominican Republic late in the fall, and they got to play like 7, 8, 9 games together as a unit against past, present, and future major league players. Like while resting some of those top 4 or 5 arms, they got to see what some of these other guys had left. And they had success there. So when other teams are only playing 2 or 3 fall games, Michigan got to play, I don't know, a dozen. And it seems like that helped with the cohesiveness of the new names getting assimilated to that team. And then now, obviously, they came out and looked like they looked terrific. And I would assume they're banging on the door of the top 25. Um,
No doubt. No doubt.
yeah. One of the other teams in the Big Ten who had a really good weekend was Penn State. You know, they went 2-1 over the weekend, beat Missouri and UConn. They got really good starts from Mason Horwat and Ryan DeSanto in their 2 wins. Those 2 combined to throw 9 innings, only allowed 1 hit and 1 earned run with 13 strikeouts. Offensively, the Nittany Lions are built differently this year than they were last year. You saw them in the Big Ten tournament last year.
Mhm.
They relied on the long ball. They had a lot of thumpers in that lineup. Adam Cesare, JT Marr. This year they're kind of a more complete offense. They brought in Paxton Kling, one of the top newcomers in the whole conference. Very highly regarded high school guy, played well for LSU. His freshman year on their national championship team, kind of fell off last year. He had a good weekend, hit a home run over the weekend, and if he plays to the top of his ability, he's a Big Ten Conference Player of the Year type talent, as is Bryce Molinaro, their third baseman. So, with the increased pitching depth that they have there, combined with the experience that they have on the offensive side, and they were last year, they were only 1 win away from making a regional. That's a bar that we think they'll clear this year and making it to a regional, and they got off to a great start this weekend.
Yeah, I think the one thing that always stands out the most for me with Michigan is even when you watch them play, is if you have any questions about their team, Tracy Smith is certainly on the right to get the benefit of the doubt. You know, so like if you have a question like I don't know if they have enough arms, or I don't know if they're going to be able to turn this guy around or something like that. And you mentioned David Lally, a guy that was extremely talented coming out of high school, started his career at Notre Dame, and just really had a hard time getting playing time because he had a hard time throwing strikes. You know, he goes to Michigan and within like the either the first game or the second game, he had 5 shutout innings. And it's just like
Mhm.
that benefit of doubt. He's making the most of these kids. He and his staff are making these guys better. Penn State, you know, you mentioned the Big Ten tournament. I got to cover them there. First time I ever had a chance to cover a Mike Gambino, coach team. And like that, like I don't think any other coach could convince me to run through a brick wall than that guy's program.
Right.
And I asked him a question that had like an if statement to it. And I know I've shared this with you before, but he stopped me and corrected me and he said when, and he wasn't like scolding me about it. Like he was just that confident, that confidence he carries to his players that they know they're gonna excel. And they made it all the way to the championship game at the Big Ten tournament, eventually losing to Nebraska. So and Nebraska happens to be the next team I'm going to jump right into because they're actually playing their 4th game down in Arizona right now. I think they're down. Yep, they're down to Grand Canyon 3-1 in the top of the 9th. So this is their last chance here to try to come out on top. But I liked your comparison of going to the grocery store. I had that moment with Nebraska. So it was one of the very first fall reports I did, and I talked to Coach Bolt over the phone, talked about his team, was very familiar with everybody that he was bringing back. But, going into the conversation, I was kind of thinking, all right, you lost your best pitcher, the Big Ten pitcher of the year, Brett Fears, and you lost your best hitter, catcher Josh Karen. Like that's a hard place to start. But then the more I researched it, I see, they're bringing in some guys to fill some holes, and they basically brought everybody back. I want to say they had like 26 returners or something like that, just a ridiculous number of returners. And they still reinforced it with new guys. They hit the junior college ranks right in that, like those JUCO powers that are in Missouri and Kansas that always develop really good players. Nebraska is one of the best at finding those players, and Iowa too, I should mention. But yeah, Nebraska, they lost on day one to UC Irvine. They come back and they beat, I think number 16 Vanderbilt. And then yesterday they beat to San Diego State, I believe. So bounce back to go 2-1 on the weekend. We'll see what happens with this game. But very impressive. And I want to point out with Nebraska is just they were the team that, like, once I got done writing up, I sent a message, because for those that aren't aware, Burke and I aren't involved with the top 25 conversation, but we certainly provide input when we feel strongly enough about a team. And Nebraska was definitely one of those teams. I stepped up and just mentioned to Aaron Kendall, I'm like, this team has top 25 upside. They've got the same potential, and Nebraska opened the year as the 24th ranked team in the country. So I think it's well deserved. I think they're really good, and I'm going to see them, and I think about a little over a month time, and I'm excited for that. So the other team I'm going to mention briefly is Oregon. They went 3-1 versus Toledo. They're the highest ranked of the Big Ten team, not a Midwest team, certainly, but by playing in the Big Ten, you're automatically adopted as a Midwest program. They went 3-1 versus Toledo. Grayson Grinzel gave him a good start in that first game. He was our projected Big Ten pitcher of the year going into the season. We certainly expected them to enjoy a strong weekend at home against Toledo, and they came through with that exactly as not exactly, but as we hoped or thought they would. So the fifth of the five Big Ten teams I want to hit, I'm going to throw it back to you, Bert. UCLA, and this was a team when we did the preview. We talked about five teams in the Big Ten making the NCAA tournament. It was really hard to leave UCLA out because they didn't have their greatest season a year ago, but you knew they were going to be a lot better. Last year, they played a lot of freshmen, and all those freshmen got on some valuable on-the-job training with several sophomores now. There is a ton of talent on that roster. They went 3-0 against Cal Poly. A good Cal Poly is always good. They're just a good, well-coached team. What you tell us about UCLA and what you saw from them this weekend?
Yeah, so another team that threw the ball really well. They allowed 2 earned runs in 3 games, led by Landon Stump on Sunday through 5 scoreless. This UCLA team, and you touched on their youth, kind of reminds me a little bit. There's 2 ways to win, I think, in college baseball and in the Big Ten. I see it is one, you're an old team. You got a bunch of 22, 23-year-olds with a ton of experience. That's kind of like what Michigan had last year and to some extent this year. And then there's like I call it the Indiana model, where they're bringing in elite freshmen recruiting. They play as fresh, and they might take some lumps early in the year, but by the time those guys get into the regional, the moment isn't too big for them. And this UCLA team reminds me a little bit of the Indiana teams from, like, I think it was 22 or 23, where they had 4 or 5 freshmen starting and were among the top position player groups in the Big Ten. This is I think last year's freshman class was the top recruiting class in the country. And I know Rock Chalowski grabs a lot of those headlines, and rightly so, but Roman Martin and this pronunciation, I might butcher it.
I know you're going to talk about, yeah.
Mulevia Levu,
Yeah.
their first baseman. He had a monster weekend. Another guy on the pitching side that I like is Justin Lee. I liked him a lot in the Cape as a bullpen arm. Again, he's part of that strong sophomore class. He had 2 scoreless outings this weekend. You touched on it. Like, I think they're a regional caliber team. And if we had our druthers, I think we would have got them into the field of 64. But those decisions are above our pay grade. And it was hard to justify that they're going to gain that many wins from a down year last year. But I think they have the talent, certainly, to do so, especially if they play like they did this weekend.
Yeah, and John Savage is such a great ambassador for the game of college baseball. I covered UCLA extensively at the 2018. That would have been the Minneapolis Regional when Minnesota had that really crazy season, and UCLA was a part of that. And just great conversations with Coach Savage. And I had spoken with him before, and I've spoken to him since. But just that event, I will always kind of stand out for just having those kind of like you get to learn how people's, coaches' minds work when it comes to, the on the field managing. That goes way underrated in my mind when in all levels of baseball. And Coach Savage is one of the best at that for sure. Um, just briefly touching on the other team, Michigan State, you're gonna talk about them in a little bit. Went 4-0. USC went 3-0. Purdue went 4-0. All big weekends for them. Um, where are my notes on the rest of them here? So Maryland, Illinois, Northwestern, Rutgers all won their series. All won their series. Rutgers actually took 2 of 3 from Kennesaw State at Kennesaw State and received really good starting pitching. If that continues, keep an eye on that because under Steve Owens' watch, Rutgers has done a really good job, pretty much recycling their pitching staff year after year after year, and they get surprisingly good results in the process. So that's the team I'm very intrigued by. Notable series losses are Iowa. They went 1-2 at South Florida. Ohio State went 0-3 at Arizona State, which is rough, but all 3 of those games, if I remember correctly, were played pretty close, and they were in a position to win at least 2 of those. So we'll see how that plays out the rest of the season. Certainly, it's just one weekend. You can't take anything too seriously. I want to mention 3 more teams from the Midwest for just what they did over the weekend that are not part of the Big Ten. You got Kansas, who went 3-0 against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They got Patrick Stites back, who missed most of last year after having Tommy John surgery. I believe he had the surgery in April, and I think he went 2 scoreless the other day. So, he's still building back his arm strength. But that's important because that's a short turnaround time. Like Tommy John surgery, it used to be you were out a year, and now we're at the 10-month mark, and he's on the mound pitching. So that's just impressive. Joey Hawkins from Missouri State, the new head coach there in its first year. They went down to Sam Houston and went 2-1. That's an impressive opening series win on the road. And then Xavier was 2-1. I think they have one to play at Oregon State today in Arizona. I just want to point out Arizona Xavier, led by head coach Billy O'Connor, has always does a fantastic job. And I just got to share this quickly. Whenever I'm at events where there's a lot of scouts and recruiters, looking at the high school kid, like that, I've overheard this last year 3 or 4 times. They'll look at the player's name after he does something and be like, "Oh yeah, no, no surprise, he's a Xavier commit." They hit the Midwest hard, and they're really good at what they do. Here's Xavier's upcoming schedule. They're at Louisville. They're at Liberty for 3. They're at Indiana. They're at Stanford for 4. They're at Tennessee. They're at Vanderbilt for 3. They're at LSU and Southeastern Louisiana. They're at Tulane for 3. They're at Ball State for 3. And then they're at Kentucky. And this was before the last weekend of March, leading up to Big East play. And they open against UConn. So, that is a ridiculous schedule. You see it every year. North Dakota State had a season like this a couple years ago, and their schedule's actually tough again this year. But where they just go out and they challenge their players, and they win a few of those games, grab a couple of those series, and they could be an RPI monster at the end of the year. That could really help their case. But I think that yeah, go ahead.
Builds that confidence when they go into
Yep.
the Big East. I would hate to be a Big East team playing against them after they have been galvanized by that kind of schedule.
Yeah, exactly. So Xavier, keep an eye on them. I find them fascinating. I have now for a few years, and Coach O'Connor is always a pleasure to talk to. So, all right, I think we've done an appropriate recap. Burke, you want to chime in on anything else? Otherwise, I think it's
No, I'll
time
just
to
jump right
get
into
get in your observations.
yeah. So I was in the North Carolina Triangle area this weekend in Cary, Durham, and I went to Chapel Hill for an afternoon too. So much good baseball. Um, I I hope that they know in that area how lucky they are to have so many baseball options nearby because it's just fantastic. You're sitting there, rain pushes back my start time for one game, and I pull up the D1 baseball app, and I'm like, oh well, they're just playing down the road here. I can go see a game before I go to this other game, and I love it. And then you're outside all day in freezing weather and you get back to your hotel at midnight. But hey, I wouldn't have it any other way. That's why we do this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Michigan State played 2 games on Friday and 2 games on Saturday and won all 4 of them. They swept a doubleheader against Western Michigan and then beat Monmouth the day after. And the story there is Joseph Deserwa, the big 6'8" left-handed pitcher that they have for the Spartans. He was fantastic. He threw six shutout innings, struck out 11. I had 24 swings and misses, allowed 1 hit, 1 walk. He was up to 95 a couple times in the first inning. But more importantly than that, he carried 92, 93 for the duration of the start. Um, Compare that to he's been their Friday starter since his freshman year, and he weighed about 40 pounds less. He's not
Mhm.
a thick guy now, but he's put on about 40, 45 pounds of muscle. Um, and he was able to carry that velocity through the game. Whereas when I saw him as a freshman, he was like 86, 88 in the first inning, and then legitimately that down to 83, 84, 85 later in the game. Um, started to see that progression last year when I saw him, and then this year, this is what you hope a player turns into when he puts in that kind of outing on opening weekend. His changeup is a legitimate out pitch, especially against righties. He throws it with fastball arm speed, and there's 10 miles of separation between that and his fastball. Um, and then he works from a low slot with some funk in the delivery, which adds some deception to the fastball, which makes that 92, 93 seem, and he's got extension because he's so tall. So it gets on you in a hurry. Uh, so the hitters for Western Michigan, which represented the MAC in the NCAA tournament last year as as MAC tournament champions, they looked kind of silly on the mound at the plate, and Dessert was going to do that to a lot of hitters this year because he's just incredibly difficult to time up with a low 90s fastball, low 80s, upper 70s change, and then he has a really slow for a slider. It's called a slider, but it's 72, 75. And that's really more of a get me over pitch. The fastball and changeup are what he uses to really get people out. He'll throw that slider to start out 0-1 in a count. And then he was experimenting with a cutter, a kind of a mid 80s short slider, which is an effective pitch. He only threw it 2 or 3 times, but I could see that becoming a weapon as the season progresses and he's getting through the order 2 or 3 more times. 4-0 is the good news for Michigan State. The bad news is they did it despite hitting 163 as a team. So, and with only 2 extra base hits, they're not going to be a team that's going to hit 100 home runs and score 10 runs a game. So they'll need to play small ball, move runners and steal bases. And that's what they did in the Dessert will win. One of my favorite plays of the entire weekend. They're playing against Western Michigan, and Western Michigan starter Ty McKinstry was really going toe to toe with Dessert. He shut him out for 6 innings. Um, Michigan State finally got a couple runners on late in the game, and Coach Jake Boss there at Michigan State calls the double suicide squeeze from the dugout. And credit to Jacob Anderson for getting the button down, which scored the runner at third, and then Randy Seymour, the athletic shortstop for Michigan State, got a great jump at second base, didn't stop at third, scores at home on a bang bang play. So boom, you get 2 runs without without recording a base hit. And to me, in an era of college baseball where ERAs are ballooning and home runs are skyrocketing, it's cool to see every now and then a team win with small ball. So that was fun to watch. And offensively, the Spartans there wasn't a whole lot of standouts. Again, they didn't hit the ball great, but JT Sokolov, who's an Illinois State transfer, and Ryan McKay, they both got on base a lot this weekend and used their wheels. They stole 5 bases between the 2 of them. Pretty encouraging performances on the mound that they had. Nolan Higgins, he's a guy who came from a prep school, Orchard Lake St. Mary's, that powerhouse in the Michigan Detroit suburbs. Who they produced, they might have 2 first rounders this year in Nolan Schubert and Ike Irish. And that was the same team that had Brock Porter, I think, who was a top 10 or 11 pick for Texas. But he threw the ball well. He's had an up and down career. He was 90 to 92, and he allowed no runs, 2 hits, and 2 walks over I think 6 innings with 4 strikeouts. They need him to be solid. Zach Maxey is a former Maction player from Miami, Ohio. He's a fifth-year guy. He came in relief on Friday and threw great. Logan Picard was one of their top relief arms last year, and he logged 2 saves this weekend. So those were the encouraging things that they want to build off of, is the performances that they had on the mound, and then try to get a little more consistent offensively. And it's a terrific start for Michigan State, who we don't think will be at the top of the conference, but it's encouraging for them to get off to a good start and have a good year, and hopefully get into the Big Ten tournament.
And a little with a legit ace too. I remember seeing the Thurwall his
Yeah.
freshman year, and like to your point, like when he was kind of thrown into the fire as being an ace from almost day one. And like I remember watching it on ESPN Plus this game. I just kind of happened it by chance and seeing him pitch, like it really caught your attention. It was just like you saw him to your point. He was just all arms and legs and just like had that baby giraffe,
Yes.
description like to a T. And you knew if he was going to get bigger, he was going to throw harder. You could see the spin on the baseball. You could see the sequencing. Like he understood the finer nuances of pitching. And it was exciting to see like your video over the weekend, because it certainly looks like all those pieces are coming together.
And Dessert was a guy that reminded me a lot of, remember, he was a Big Ten guy, Sean Sullivan, who started his career at Northwestern. Not the same body, but Sullivan was like 6'5", 6'4" lefty who threw kind of from a low slot with a really good
Yeah.
changeup. And that's where I see the similarities between he and Deserwa. And like Sean Sullivan, Desert was he dipped his toe into the transfer portal over the summer, briefly committed to Vanderbilt before pulling it back and going back to Michigan State. And I think I love to see that. We see a lot of
Yeah.
talent and then
Yeah.
go to the SEC. For me,
Yeah. He
it's
was
nice.
supposed to go to Vanderbilt, right? Like he
Yeah,
was
yeah. He
fine.
briefly announced that he committed to Vanderbilt, but rather than being, one of multiple guys at Vanderbilt, like he is the guy at Michigan State.
Yeah.
And I think whoever completed the survey the preseason survey that we send out every year said, in their response, Michigan State's going to go as far as Joseph Dessert takes them. And that's really the truth. Like, and, and he can really line up with these top teams at the on any given Friday night. And then when win Friday, anything can happen the rest of the weekend. So
Yep.
I think Michigan State is going to be competitive because of Joseph Dezerwa and the style of play that they're going to have to play behind him.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see what we have in store from the Spartans. It's like I think about this all the time. I think we have the Spartans like third or fourth to last. And you hate doing it because, I do it with Northwestern and Washington, all those teams that we projected to be at the bottom. I can easily see scenarios where all those teams, are much better than what we have projected. Obviously, someone has to finish last. Someone
Yes.
has to finish at the bottom. And for a conference that has 12 teams make it to the tournament, obviously 5 of those are not going to make the Big Ten tournament in Omaha. So that said, next team, Cincinnati, they went down to Durham and took care of Duke. And why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, it took 2 of 3 against our number 11 Duke is what we had them ranked, including just a whooping of 19-5 yesterday. The only game they lost was super competitive. It was a one-run game on Saturday that they lost at 12 innings. Um, Cincinnati was one of those teams that they talked about as having improved depth on the mound, and they weren't shitting us. Like, they only got 8 and 2/3 innings out of their starters this weekend, which means that they get 21 plus innings out of their bullpen. A lot of them were freshmen. So that's the story for me, because they performed extremely well in a hostile environment against a ranked opponent. Some of these guys making their collegiate debuts. So Joel Pinero, Adam Buskowski, Max Bergman, those 3 combined for 9 1/3 scoreless innings. Offensively, Carrington Cross is their dude at Cincinnati. Coach Bichelle called him one of the most valuable players in college baseball. He's really competitive, high energy. He sets the tone at the top, both with his competitive at bats and with the energy that he brings in firing up the team. he uses the whole field. So he hit 2 home runs this weekend, 1 to each side, and then yesterday, he bunted for a base hit with bases loaded. Uh, the style of play that I saw from Cincinnati reminded me a lot of what we saw from Jordan Bischel when he was at Central Michigan. It's competitive at bats. They're not gonna give you anything. They're not gonna chase. They're gonna take walks. They're gonna use the short game, to put the ball in play. They're gonna wear HBPs on their shoulder and sprint down to first base, and the dugout's gonna go crazy. They had no one had more fun this weekend in a miserable, cold, freezing environment in a hostile place than the Cincinnati Bearcats. And they seem to be more loose than Duke too. And Duke will be fine, by the way. But the story was how this Cincinnati team played, and yeah, they're in the top 25 now, I think, for the first time in school history, and it's really kind of exciting to, I live in Ohio. I compare it to when if the Reds or the Guardians are good, or if the Browns or the Bengals are good. When there's people talking about the sport that you love in the state that you live in, it's good, even if I'm not rooting for him. So people were getting excited for the Cincinnati team. They traveled really well. There was a lot of fans in the stands from Cincinnati. So it's cool to see that program building, and it's cool to see Coach Michelle, who you and I are both familiar with from his MAC days, succeeding at a new level.
Yeah, he took Central Michigan to 3 straight NCAA tournaments, I believe. And that, for what's considered a one bid league, to go and win that tournament 3 years in a row, that's impressive. And I covered them. They were at Notre Dame in, what that been, 2022. And to your point, the offense, like they grind out at bats and they just wear you down. And they're not a passive group because they'll attack fastballs, and they're very aggressive on the base paths and always putting runners in motion. Just a really fun offense to watch. And Jordan Bichelle is just a fantastic coach. He's going to start getting more national recognition. I know, like Aaron Fick, Kendall Rogers, and the rest of the guys, they're all well aware of who Jordan Bichelle is, but I think, that next level now, I think if this success continues, obviously, but I just think more and more people are going to recognize him as one of the better coaches in the nation, especially the Midwest. So,
yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Coach Michelle, he just seems to be that calming presence. Like the moment is never too big for him. Like, and there were a couple times where games were on the line this weekend, and he would go out to the mound and seemingly say whatever was needed to calm the folks down, and they would get out of the inning. It was impressive to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy for their success. Let's go.
Yeah.
All right, Burke, anything else on Cincinnati you want to share?
Nope.
All right. Well, I guess the other thing is to just look ahead to the weekend ahead. And I'm excited because I spend my weekend at home. And today I'm spending my day inside because it's balmy 6 degrees outside. But on Thursday, I leave I'm flying to Orlando, Florida. I'm going to be covering the DeLand tournament hosted by Stetson, who I'm really excited to see. You got Iowa's Notre Dame, host Stetson, and UMBC all in DeLand, Florida. So I want to thank you because you're the one that originally brought that tournament to my attention. So I'm very excited about that. I'm also going to see UCF host Bryant. UCF, I think, just a little research I've done, like it really caught my attention. I know they're not Midwest. They're not even mid-major. Those are my 2 big areas of focus. But I'm certainly excited to see UCF play. Their head coach is Rich Wallace, who was an assistant under Link Jarrett at Notre Dame. He played at UCF, so I think there's a lot of just cool storylines, a lot of cool parallels, and a ton of talent on that roster. So I'm excited about this weekend ahead. So,
and I want to point out, to make sure our listeners know, in addition to being an advocate for Midwest baseball, Patrick runs point for D1 baseball and mid-major coverage, and is getting to cross off a lot of those good ones, it sounds like, this coming weekend. So make sure you're following him for mid-major coverage in addition to the fantastic Midwest baseball coverage he provides.
Yeah, thank you. I got to say, I'm pretty stoked with my lineup of mid-majors, because then in a couple of weeks, I'm going to see like Dallas Baptist and Louisiana, Tulane. If I'm feeling especially aggressive about my time in a rental car, I may go to Hattiesburg and see Southern Miss and UNCW. I'm not so sure at this point in time if I want to do that, but nonetheless, I'm stoked about the travel that I have ahead of me and the teams that I'm going to see. So, all right, Bert, with that, I think we put a bow on this one. So, as always, thanks for your contributions and sharing your observations. I hope anyone that took the time to tune in and be patient with us as we do this for the first time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you join us again. And we'll be doing this every week, all season long, to recap the weekend that was. So until next time, he's Burke. I'm Patrick. This is Big Baseball and Beyond, a D1 Baseball podcast.